Hey there. Today on Transformational Thinkers, I'm sitting down with Susan Levi from Gingy HR to dig into all the wild twists and turns happening in HR right now. Think tricky legal cases, keeping top talent happy, and why just ignoring problems totally backfires. Whether you're a CEO or just love a peek behind the HR curtain, trust me, this is one conversation you shouldn't miss. Let's dive in. Susan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Outstanding. In talking with you, Gingy HR has developed a reputation for tackling complex, eccentric, and sometimes difficult employee legal cases. What trends or shifts are you seeing in these cases today, and what can CEOs learn from them before trouble arises?
That's a great question. We are continuing to see a lot of wage and hour claims, a lot of compliance-related claims, and particularly because we're seeing the workforce has expanded throughout the country. So with 2020 and the pandemic, employees started scattering around, some headquarters closed, and employers saw the opportunity to start hiring people in other states. And with that also brings a lot of additional compliance. And that has been a struggle for employers, particularly smaller employers who might not have the internal bandwidth to thoroughly research and know that, what the local municipality, you're in Texas, but you're hiring someone in Denver or in Los Angeles, and what that means for leaves of absences, for pay, for different pieces of compliance. And we're still seeing a lot of that, and making sure, making sure that when you're expanding to other areas, that you're really vetting those areas. And we have some employers that we work with that don't want to hire in certain places because they know that it's going to come with a lot of additional compliance. So and then just in general, wage and hour, just seeing people not being classified properly, people not being paid in a compliant manner, depending on where the employee is located, is a common one.
Interesting. Susan, what recommendations do you have for employers when employee relations concerns brew up a storm?
Gotta love when that happens, right? Well, one of the biggest pitfalls is just failing to take action, right?
Ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. That's for sure.
Exactly. And the way that it's often phrased is, if the employer knew or should have known that something was going on, they have the responsibility to take action. So if everyone in the workplace knows, even if it wasn't formally reported to a supervisor or formally reported to the CEO, there's still an expectation that they should have known and therefore taken action. And so, sometimes when you hear those big lawsuits, like they were given millions of dollars, it's like, well, this person reported it 5 times and the employer didn't do anything.
That's the worst.
Yes. And so you have to do your due diligence. And, sometimes the person, the offending employee who is engaging in the inappropriate behavior is otherwise a great employee. They're a high performer sometimes. And so some employers want to look the other way, and that's really what catches them up. So, doing your due diligence, depending on the situation, it doesn't mean you always have to fire the person, but making sure you're investigating it, that you're documenting that you did it, that you're documenting you took some steps. Maybe it's giving extra training to the employee, right? Like maybe it's
getting them a coach.
Exactly.
Maybe.
And it's executive coach so that they learn how to maybe not be as abrasive in the workplace.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, that's a tough situation. And it's very interesting that you find that so many people are just ignoring the problem.
Yes. Yeah. Because maybe that's not the right blanket statement. but particularly when the person is a high performer otherwise. And you'll hear, and then the solution might be, oh, well, we'll just move the complaining employee under a different supervisor, which doesn't actually address the problem. And then, you have your next batch of employees complaining about this person. And there's actually been some court cases in some states where, they've said, moving someone to under someone else or to a different location is not taking all of the steps that are necessary as an employer.
Fascinating. So more to come on that. There obviously is quite a bit being discussed in cases actively, if that's where guidance is headed. Recruiting and retention are frontline issues for every CEO right now. What hiring or engagement strategies have proven most effective for your clients that need speed and culture fit in this highly fluid labor market?
That's a great question. One of my favorite tips for the recruiting process is to use behavioral questions. So in a behavioral question, rather than asking a hypothetical, like, what would you do if? Instead, we're saying, tell me about a time when you did X, or give me an example of when you did X, with the belief that past performance is an indication of future performance. And so we found if you ask these hypotheticals, people know what answer you're looking for. It's easier to kind of fluff around, give a textbook answer that might not be what you truly do in a situation.
Right.
So we found that asking these behavioral questions has helped identify candidates that are going to be a better fit, that are going to meet the expectations for the role and for what performance you're looking for. So that you're not bringing people in, spending all the time and resources on recruiting someone, bringing them in, hiring them, onboarding them, training them, to then, 90 days later, start the process all over again because they weren't actually the right fit.
Right. I'm a big fan of behavioral interviewing and consulting. It's almost exclusively behavioral questions.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of experience with it personally as I've progressed in my career. And I do think it does paint a picture realistically of how you show up in the workplace.
Exactly.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah. It's harder to bluff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Employee turnover still feels like an unpredictable variable for many CEOs. How do you guide clients to build stickier engagement programs that actually keep top performers around?
Yeah. We've seen some organizations implement stay interviews. So as opposed to like an exit interview where you're only getting feedback from the people that are leaving, they have conducted stay interviews. So a little bit different than an employee survey. Instead, more of like a one-on-one, let me get direct feedback from some of our top performers who are staying. What do you appreciate? Yeah, what do you appreciate about the organization? What's been working well for you? What is keeping them happy and keeping them here? So how can we continue to create that dynamic with other top performers? So
I love that.
Helpful. Yeah.
That's really compelling. I haven't heard of that at all.
Oh, interesting.
And I haven't heard of that. And so that is a wonderful development.
Yeah, it's great.
I think that is a here to stay strategy.
Yes. And why wait until someone is, over the organization to get feedback and, they're walking out the door? Let's get the feedback now.
I think the exit interviews are still important, but I do love the idea of understanding what is working for those that are still committed.
Yes, exactly.
Fascinating.
I saw something interesting I was reading the other day that was like, most people like their jobs at the beginning, but then they get to some point where, whether it's just they want to change or they don't like their manager anymore, or, this is a high pressure organization and that's worn on them, or whatever it is, like it starts to fade. It's not that like most people just hate their job from day one. And so like, how can we capture that feeling when people are more at the top of their appreciation of the organization so that we can continue to replicate that?
I think there's a lot that could be understood there
Yep.
with more research.
Yep.
For sure. I do know that, some people get tired of an opportunity just because they're not challenged anymore. They're not growing.
Yes.
They might be very good at the role they're in, but they may also be bored to tears.
Yes. Yes.
And so I do think there's opportunity there for employers to really make sure they are providing opportunities for growth.
Yes. And, I think we were talking about the other day, Sarah, just looking at what are the opportunities of growth in an organization, particularly for people who might not want to go the management route. And there's so much focus on the only way to grow in an organization is to manage people.
Right.
And some people are great at their jobs, but they don't want to manage people. They're not focused on that. So how do you offer opportunities for these people like you're describing that, they're bored, they feel stagnant, but they also don't want to, manage a team of 10.
Yes.
And organizations are losing people if they don't give those other avenues for growth that are outside of just going the manager ladder.
Right. I definitely see tremendous value in having opportunities as an individual contributor and for management track opportunities, because you need different types of people in your organization.
Yep.
And you need all of them to be engaged.
Exactly.
And so I definitely think that's a tremendous opportunity. Susan, with 4 generations now active in the workforce, expectations around flexibility, growth, and management are colliding. How can executives recalibrate their leadership styles to meet this moment?
Yeah. Hitting on the flexibility piece, I do think that there's a shift now that flexibility isn't just a perk for an organization. There is a business need for your infrastructure to have flexibility. Of course, we're talking about like a professional level. You're not going to have flexibility often in a restaurant where you have to have the person in the shift to serve the table. But if you're in professional level roles, there is an expectation now of flexibility. And so you have sometimes older generations that are like, well, I didn't have that when I was their age.
For certain.
Yes. And so, they need to put their time in, but the most successful organizations are the ones that they're building it in. They're not micromanaging every single minute. They're looking more at, what is the output? Is this person meeting my performance expectations? Are they meeting the deadlines? If they need to take their dog to the vet today for an hour, I'm not micromanaging that time because I know that they'll be able to perform in the manner that I'm looking for.
That's super healthy.
Yes. But sometimes it's a hurdle to get some managers over that hump of, well, I didn't get that however many decades ago when they were in that place in their career. And the most successful organizations and managers are the ones that are providing that flexibility. And then I'd also say another piece of generational difference that we see a lot has to do with feedback and employee feedback. Younger generations are expecting ongoing feedback. They want to hear regularly. They want quick check-ins. They want to know how they're doing. They want to know how they can continue to improve, where you sometimes have older generations or people in manager roles who are used to the annual, we sit down and talk about it annually. And if I'm not bringing anything to you in the meantime, then that means you're doing a good job. And
that seems so old school. It seems ancient.
But we still see, I still see organizations that are just doing the annual, I checked the box and did the performance review. The one time a year. So shifting out of that and building in a culture of ongoing feedback is really important to get the younger generations to feel as more committed.
Interesting. Susan, you've worked closely with management teams on training and development. What are the most effective approaches, especially new approaches, that you're seeing for skill building for new managers getting promoted from an individual contributor role? That's a really pivotal time in your career.
Yeah.
To be able to progress beyond the individual contributor.
Yes. So similarly to kind of getting some managers on this like feedback train of like ongoing feedback, a lot of new managers we see just struggle having feedback conversations at all. They struggle having difficult conversations. They struggle with holding employees to expectations, and then they kind of avoid those conversations until things bubble up, and then they're so frustrated with an employee and they're like, why can't I get them off my team? But they haven't taken any steps given that feedback. And again, it's not the same as what we were just talking about where their expectation is like you just get feedback once a year. It's just no one has taught them how do you give feedback. How do you also give positive feedback? How do you have coaching conversations? How do you make sure that your expectations are clear? If an employee completes it on time, but not to what you were expecting, was it because you didn't communicate your expectations properly? Like, where is the gap? And teaching those managers how to identify it. Is this an employee performance issue, or is this a communication issue on my part? So that they can overcome that and make their team as successful as possible.
Interesting. You can't underestimate the power of being able to communicate.
Yes.
As a new manager, it really cannot be underestimated, the importance of learning some of those really foundational skills.
Exactly.
Communication is critical.
Yeah. And being able to have those difficult conversations. It's uncomfortable. You have to build that muscle.
Totally.
It's not the fun, glamorous part of the role, but it's, what makes sure that you're driving to whatever the end goal is for your department or your team.
I've seen at very senior management levels when a company has had, for instance, a co-CEO type situation where they have very senior leaders that are peers on top of the organization leading it. I do find that in the end, a lot of times it does come down to the individual wanting to communicate within the organization and the key leaders receiving it.
Yes.
So the actual relationship between the leader and their management team and seeing results from that individual. It typically plays out that way, with the exception of situations when the board makes a certain decision based on personality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty fascinating stuff. And so, Susan, AI is reshaping HR faster than most executives anticipated. How is Genji HR integrating AI into processes like recruiting, creating performance metrics for roles, or investigating data analytics to drive speed and effectiveness?
AI, what a hot topic right now.
No kidding.
So for us at Gingy, we are very intentional with how we use AI in ways that can speed up our process versus are these non-negotiable areas that require human judgment. We don't want to use AI for decision making. We aren't using AI for compliance, because AI isn't at that point. And it's I think we were talking about this the other day. Sometimes I'll get emails from a client's employee who obviously used AI, ChatGPT to, put their complaint into ChatGPT and then copy their ChatGPT response and send it to us. And often it's, completely inaccurate. And so I always say, don't use AI for something you don't already know. If it's to touch up, something you've drafted and maybe tighten up the language, that's great. But going to AI for questions that you don't know the answers to is just too much of a risk. And then, with the recruiting piece, there's been several states that have passed recent laws regarding the use of AI, notifying employees or candidates if you're using AI in your process, and then the protections and making sure that AI is not engaging in any discriminatory behavior. There has been some research that some of the AI tools are discriminating in the recruiting process based on perceived national origin, race, gender, just based on like candidates' names. And that responsibility, if you are an employer using that, you can't just say, oh, I'm pointing the finger to the AI system. You implemented the AI system. So it's your responsibility as an employer to vet it, continue to monitor it, make sure that it's not engaging in what could be perceived as a discriminatory action and then create risk for your organization.
Interesting. And so it really goes back to continuing to instruct the model.
Yes.
That you're using, as much as possible. The human in the loop is really, really important there.
Exactly.
Interesting. Are there areas of HR where you believe automation is a value add?
I think some of the very mechanical process of onboarding employees, there's just so many steps and tracking, and it doesn't take much decision making to send out an offer letter or track completion. So if AI can help speed up that process, that's great. But again, you get into then AI has access to confidential information. They could potentially, it could have access, AI is a they now.
Sure.
The AI could have access to phone numbers, email addresses, social security numbers. So even if you're using it in an onboarding process, which should feel like such a basic, step-by-step direct AI, and it can follow it, you have to make sure that that information is confidential, that you're working on a system that's not training using your information, that your information is going to be protected so that, you're not violating any laws or putting risk of that information being out there.
Yeah, there's always a risk in your personal information. There really is.
Yes.
And it's pretty clear that so many companies haven't protected your personal information the way they should have. And
Yes.
I mean, there have been so many breaches that it's just horrible how lack of privacy is just taken over.
Yeah, I feel like I get a letter at least quarterly saying, your data was exposed on wherever it was. It's scary, but as the employer, you really have to make sure you're doing your due diligence to protect that information. And so it's tough when you're in a position of HR. Everything that we're doing is going to have some level of confidential information. An employee leave of absence is going to have a medical note. Onboarding is going to have a social security number. There's very little that we do in HR that doesn't have confidential information. So incorporating AI into that makes it a little tricky.
It really, really does. And so, Susan, change fatigue is real in many companies. What are some practical ways HR leaders can help CEOs keep momentum and morale steady through transformation?
I would say my two biggest pieces on this, one is transparency. So making sure that if you are implementing change or getting feedback on change, that you're being transparent. So our goal with this implementation is XYZ. We're hoping that we will see improvement in customer service scores or improvement in internal communication or whatever your goal is. And when you're soliciting feedback from employees, also being transparent. If you're getting feedback that we'd all like to see that there's a monthly team meeting and you as the employer decide to not implement a monthly team meeting, having some accountability to tell them this is the reason we're going in this other direction. We're going with quarterly meetings because we found that with everyone's schedule, that's the best way. And that's obviously a very simplified answer. But employees get frustrated giving feedback and feeling like they're not heard. They get exhausted with implementing new changes and processes. They don't feel like they like, why are we doing this again? No one's told me why we're doing it. I'm tired of changing this. And then also in a similar vein, like what tracking visible progress. So if you feel like you're implementing these change initiatives, are you having visible progress that can be identified, that people can see like, oh, that change got us to here? And sometimes,
Exactly. Susan, you talked about two things that are absolutely critical for a project to work. When you have a big business transformation that you want to succeed, one of the things that I recommend to clients is to unfurl the waterfall communication plan of days gone by. And what I mean by that is, yes, you need to inform your leadership team, but I tend toward doing manager and above communication and all staff communication as much as possible.
Yep.
For the transparency need.
Yep.
Being as open and honest and transparent about what the project is, why we're doing it, what it's going to deliver in terms of value to the business. And the other piece that you mentioned that I talk about an awful lot is focusing on having metrics and outcomes that you're tracking.
Yes.
So that you can show your progress.
Exactly.
And you can also do that through things like your readiness assessment that you may do more than once on the project, if not through pulse surveys that you do several, like 3 to 5 times with less questions. But showing that you're moving the needle in awareness and understanding, and showing that you're delivering on metrics that reveal that your business is more efficient.
Yes.
The process takes less time. We are delivering to happy customers and resolving any questions or issues with speed and diligence. Anything that you can do to show those outcomes makes an absolute tremendous difference.
Exactly. And sharing that, not keeping that data just in the C-suite or just with the board, but sharing that with the all staff so that they see the success and hopefully feel motivated about any other changes that you're implementing.
Absolutely. When people see outcomes that are positive, they're going to be a lot more committed to the engagement itself that they're working on.
Yep.
And that makes a huge difference. And so, Susan, looking ahead 3 years from now, what is the single most critical shift leaders need to make now to future-proof their HR operations?
Single is tough. I'll go with my top 2.
Okay, great.
I would say the first one is really trying to transition your HR from a reactive department to a more proactive department. So how can you look ahead to spot burnout before the person quits? How can you look ahead to quell performance issues, before they happen, which might be revamping your onboarding and training process. What can you do to stay ahead of things rather than waiting for it to be an issue, have complaints, frustrated team members, missed deadlines, lack of success, missed metrics, and instead, how can you be proactive? And I'd say that is something that a lot of HR are juggling a lot of different tasks. There's compliance to keep up on, performance issues, leaves of absences, payroll, whatever they have on their desk. And so sometimes it's easy to just wait until something comes to you. But if you can take a little bit of time to shift, to get ahead of things? How do we implement stuff ahead of time so that we can change this trajectory so that before it happens, you'll see all the difference in all of the things that we were talking about: retaining employees, happier workers, more successful managers. And then the second piece that I would say is streamlining HR processes. We're still seeing a lot of employers that have many different systems. They have this applicant tracking system and this payroll system and this onboarding system and this performance review system, and they're not communicating with each other, and it's so many logins for employees and so many logins for HR and different things to manage, and it's not a smooth process, and the onboarding has a lot of hiccups, which is, some of the most important moments in an employee's first steps with an organization. They say that can make or break if someone's going to stay. And so really, really reviewing it, not just being like, well, we've done it like this for the past however many years, so we'll just keep doing it. Because it might be working in a sense that you get to whatever your goal is, but is it the most efficient way to get there? Are you spending extra unnecessary time? Are you paying too much money for too many different systems? Are you, using a lot of extra labor? And sometimes, sometimes we see that some internal HR team members like to keep it more complicated because they think that it will make them irreplaceable, more important.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And, not just keeping things status quo, but really evaluating to continue to improve and continue for excellence.
I love that you brought up that people might really want to take a hard look at the application, the opportunity for application rationalization, because we all can have a lot of different platforms that we subscribe to.
Yep.
And we just suddenly start paying monthly or yearly or whatever it is. And if it's not being used or it's not delivering the outcomes that you need, definitely we need to take a hard look at these things.
Yeah.
And it's not just IT that needs to be doing it. HR definitely needs to take a hard look at what they're using. On your earlier comment, I do love organizations with HR functions that really want to operate at their finest when they are proactive and they have a front office function through their business partners, focusing on the employee population. That kind of proactivity is absolutely table stakes in a good HR organization.
I fully agree. Exactly.
Yeah. Having that tender TLC makes a huge difference because employees feel heard and concerns are actually constructively addressed. And then you have processes in the organization that are managed where they need to be managed.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Susan, is there anything else that's on your mind that is from a client experience that you've had recently that you think, wow, people need to take that into consideration when they're thinking about improving HR?
I feel like my mind goes 1,000 miles a minute because there's like so many things that come across our desk. Yeah, I mean, I know that we already talked about it, but I think the biggest thing that I saw throughout last year was this lack of line manager skills. And so just to like reiterate that it, and I'm sure you've read the research and I can't like quote in a specific study, but, experience with a manager and having a great manager is more likely to keep an employee. And it can be more likely than even, someone getting that raise or how much PTO you're getting. So really focusing, if I was to give organizations like a goal for this year, it would be to really focus on how do you bring up that line manager skill. Those first managers so that they have the ability to coach and lead a team in a strong way.
Mm-hmm. It does make a huge difference on people that are reporting to them, because they're going to be happier people. If they have a great manager, it can totally change your outlook on life.
Yes. And some things that we think are just common sense, of how do you discipline someone, or how do you address if someone if someone tells their manager that they have a disability and need an accommodation, or they need a leave of absence, training those managers from an HR perspective of how to respond to that, how to pass it to HR, how to respond in the moment in an empathetic way that knows that we hear you and we're going to make sure that this is addressed. That can also greatly impact the employee experience, make the managers feel confident in what to do when those kinds of interactions happen. Because sometimes it's also just like the managers don't understand the HR component, because they kind of collide, right? Mm-hmm. Until the employee gets passed to HR, the manager's the person they go to. And so sometimes just like basic HR training for managers is important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the manager role is the most critical role in the organization. And that's part of why I say communicating to managers and above is the most effective way. Because if you go to the middle of the organization, your message is going to get heard.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Susan.
This is so great. Great to talk to you.
Here are 3 key takeaways from today's discussion. Proactive, not reactive HR wins. Shifting from a reactive to a proactive HR approach is essential. Spot issues like employee burnout and performance gaps before they escalate. Revamp onboarding, enhance ongoing training, and stay ahead of compliance challenges. Empower your line managers. The most significant impact on employee retention often comes from great managers. Invest in foundational management skills, clear communication, and basic HR training for first-level leaders. It's a game changer for morale and performance. Thoughtful tech and AI integration. Embrace automation for repetitive HR processes like onboarding, but keep a close human eye on areas that require judgment and oversight. With regulations and data privacy top of mind, HR must ensure that tech is a true value add and not a risk factor. Want to build a future-proof HR organization? Focus on proactive strategies, manager development, and smart technology use. To my listeners, please leave ratings and reviews wherever you listen to my podcast. As always, I love to get your thoughts and comments.